Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to a very special edition of the show here. We've got a very cool guest today from Blue Oyster Cult, none other than guitarist, keyboard player, singer, songwriter, Richie Castellano, my fellow New Yorker. How are you today, my friend? Happy holidays to you, by the way.
Thank you very much. Happy holidays to you. I'm doing great, and thank you for having me on the show. I watched this show. I'm a fan of your YouTube channel, and I'm very excited to be here.
Thank you. Well, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. So you know how things go here, so no surprises. So, and Richie and I were just.
I'm ready for all the gotcha questions, all the tough, hard hitting gotcha questions. No, I'm kidding.
Richie and I were just talking off camera before we got started that I actually attended one of Blue Oyster Cult shows recently in Middletown, New York, at the Paramount. So which was great. Apparently they have a new sound system there and everything, and the set list was great. We'll get to that going through, but it was very cool to see you guys once again. And I think one of the great things about being a Blue Oyster Cult fan these days, you know, late in the career of the band, is that you guys are on the road quite a bit, and usually you can count on a BOC show in your area almost every year. I mean, that's what it seems like to me in recent years, which is really, really great. So kudos to you guys for just constantly going out and playing for the fans, even in this tough time. I mean, we know how hard it is now. So so you have now close to 20-year history with the band at this point?
I started working for the band in 2000, so 21 years.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah,
it's crazy. And you've been in various roles throughout the years. Can you talk a little bit about like the really early days when you first started working? Because you really weren't like a performing member of the band early
no.
So it's really morphed a bit over the years.
I've done every position in the band except for drums, and Jules says if he ever sees me picking up a drumstick, he'll break my arms. But I started working for the band in 2000. I was attending Purchase College in Westchester, and studying music production, and I've told the story a lot of times, and I think I've got it down to like just the highlights, so I don't go on forever and ever. But basically, the band's sound guy, front of house guy, Steve Lacera, is an old family friend of mine, and I've known him since I'm a small child. He would shop at my grandparents' music store, and he lived in the neighborhood. So he was mixing the band, and a situation came up where he couldn't make a weekend's worth of gigs, and there was no sub. And there was a miscommunication where they thought that there was a sub booked, but there was no sub booked. So, okay, we have a gig in a few days. What are we going to do? And all of the usual suspects of who could sub for front of house sound, they were all booked already. So as sort of like a Hail Mary, they called this college kid, said, "Hey, you wanna mix Blue Oyster Cult this weekend?" And I'd done a lot of live sound, but it was mainly like weddings and bar mitzvahs. So I was like, wait a minute, so you mean I can make it as loud as I want? Like, yeah, okay, sign me up. And then there I was a few days later. I think it was in Binghamton. We did a show, and we were on the bill with Foreigner, and I love Foreigner, so that was a real treat for me to get to see, another amazing band, one of my favorites, on that day. And all I remember is just having sort of like trauma from people's aunts and grandmothers yelling at me at weddings, could you turn it down? And so the tour manager at the time, Bill Lotzko, said, make this as loud and obnoxious as you'd like. I was like, that's all I needed to hear. So I pushed some serious air that night out of the band. It was an outdoor show. Like, you could hear Bobby's toms bouncing off buildings in the distance because I just wanted it to be loud and big. And after the show, Bobby told me, he's like, I heard the PA from behind the drum set. I think we were good. I think we're at a good level. And they kept hiring me. I really liked everybody. And as a kid, it was like a little rock vacation. Like, I got to go see a place I'd never been to. Like, every time Woody, Steve Lacera's nickname is Woody. We call him Woody. And every time he couldn't do a show, instead of getting their regular sub, I became the regular sub, and it was awesome. Like, every couple of months, I'd go away for 3 or 4 days, see a new part of the country, get to mix some rock and hang out with a great group of guys. And really, everybody was very warm to me. I didn't get that close to Eric. I think Eric just knew I was like a sub, and I wasn't there a lot of times. So, I mean, Eric was very nice to me, but I never really got close to him. until they asked me if I wanted to go sub a tour in Germany in 2003. I had a passport, but I'd never been out of the country before. So this is my first time leaving the country with a rock band. We did a double bill with Uriah Heep, 13 cities. We were gone for 20 days. It was amazing. It was awesome. And me and Eric really bonded on that trip because we both got on the tour bus. I'd never been on a tour bus before. And we both said, "Oh, cool, Xbox," at the same time. You know, I'm like, you're like a lot older than me. You play Xbox? You go, "Oh yeah, yeah. I just beat Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic." I'm like, "I just beat Star Wars Knights of the Republic." And then the funny thing is, he went, I said, "I didn't know you were into this stuff." He goes, "Oh yeah," and I reach into my bag and I pull out all. Now remember, this is before like you can have your entire library on your phone, right?
Yeah.
I reached out into my suitcase and I pulled out all 3 extended Lord of the Rings box sets, and then he reaches in his all 2 at that point, and he reaches in his suitcase and you know, shows me, yeah, he brought the same thing, and it was like that scene in Step Brothers. Do we just become best friends? You know what I mean? So while everybody is like sightseeing and you know, shopping and experiencing German culture, Eric and I are on the bus watching Lord of the Rings. Because that was the month that the third one came out in the theater, The Return of the King, and we were bitching that like, "Oh, we're gonna miss this one." And I'm like, "Oh, my friends are home. They're going to the midnight show." I was so upset, and the bus driver overheard us talking about this, and he got us tickets at an English movie theater. So we got to see.
There's a way, right?
Yeah, I can't remember what city we were in, but me and Eric went to a English movie theater with mostly Americans, and we got to see the opening premiere day of Lord of the Rings: Return of the King in Germany, on tour with a rock band. Crazy. And I don't know if Eric would want me to tell the story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. But before the movie starts, you know, I have like my Twizzlers, my popcorn, my drink. I'm getting settled in for the 3-hour, you know, extravaganza. And Eric he looks at me, he goes, "Look, I come to the movie for the movie. I don't want to hear you crinkling the wrappers. I don't want to hear you chewing on pop. I don't want to hear you slurping. I'm here for the movie. This is not a dining experience for me. This is a cinema experience." I'm going, "Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, fine." So like we're about 20 minutes into the movie, and I'm like, I really want a Twizzler right now. And I'm like opening the thing, and I'm looking at him like trying to like, you know, not make any noise.
The eye probably goes.
Yeah, exactly. Like the eye of Sauron, the eye of Bloom just comes out of it. I'm like, "Oh my damn it." So then like 2 seconds later, I think Legolas surfs off an elephant and shoots 3 guys with an arrow, and Eric shakes me and goes, "That was freaking awesome!" He yells in the middle of the theater. I'm like, what happened to quiet cinematic experience? But I realized that, you know, that's the kind of relationship that Eric and I have. He's has to break chops a little bit with me, and I, you know, that whole experience really, we bonded over just, you know, having this geek experience in Germany, and we kept in touch afterwards. We played like online video games together. It was actually in an online video game that I invited him to come see me play. He'd never seen me play before, and I was doing a local show here in Staten Island with my cover band, and we were doing all of the Beatles' Rubber Soul that night. And Eric's, like me, is a massive Beatles fan, so he came down to watch, and he sat in. He did Cities on Flame with us, which was really fun. And then like a couple weeks later, a situation came up where they were about to be without a bass player, and they only had 4 days to fill the slot. So Eric, remembering that he just watched me play and that I could, you know, learn a lot of music pretty quickly, he called me up one morning when I'm, you know, in bed sleeping in my parents' house, and he's like, "Hey, do you have a bass?" It was like 6 in the morning. I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Do you rock? Do you have a bass?" I'm like, what is happening here?" And he was like, "Are you free this weekend? Can you play a show on Friday?" I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "Okay." And then I kind of thought I dreamt it. So I had to call him back later in the day. I'm like, "Did you call me?" He's like, "Yeah. Can you do this weekend?" And I'm like, yeah, I can do this weekend. So he gave me a list of like 22 songs to learn, which it's a lot.
Yeah.
But luckily, I from mixing them so many times, I was kind of familiar with a lot of them. It was like I had the major arrangements kind of blocked out, like it was just a, getting into the details. And I also had the Long Day's Night DVD. So
That's a
I
good one.
I studied that like the gospel. And then 4 days later, or 5 days of the first gig I was supposed to play actually got rained out. So instead of playing the gig, we got together in Buck's hotel room, and me, Eric, Bobby, and Alan went through the entire set with Don was Buck was playing the little Martin backpacker guitar that looks like a little boat oar,
Yep.
and Bobby was playing drumsticks on a like a hotel chair, and Eric and Alan were like air guitaring and air playing because all the instruments were packed up. So, and I had my bass with me, and I remember I plugged my bass into the TV of the hotel so we can hear it. I'm pretty sure I destroyed it, but I didn't mean to. I'm not that kind of musician where I don't like throwing TVs out the window. I don't do that. I'm very casual, very low key. It was an accident. I apologize to the Days
No
Inn,
Led Zeppelin
Farmingdale.
shenanigans going on here, right?
Yeah, the Days Inn in Farmingdale, New York. My apologies. But yeah, and we went through the entire set. We played all 21, 22 songs. And then the next day was Vegas, was my first gig. And that was like where a lot of the hardcore BOC fans would like to congregate for their like annual meetup. Let's go to Las Vegas and go see the show. So that was my first show in front of the most discerning audience who would know if I played a single note wrong. And it was so much fun. It was amazing. And they kept asking me to come back every week. And this went on for months. Hey, you busy next week? You busy next week? Until finally I'm like, would you like me to like keep coming back, like in the band? And then Buck was like, why, do you want to join the band? I said, yeah. He goes, all right, you're in the band. That's how ceremonious it was, for me to join the band. And then I played bass for like a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then Alan retired, and they were gonna get another keyboard guitar guy, but they knew I already played both, and it's easier to find a guy that plays keyboard or guitar than it is to find a guy who plays keyboard and guitar.
Right.
So they kind of knew I already did that, and they said, okay, it'll be easier for us to find a bass player. And also, like, we're in a weird spot because we have to replace an original member. Alan's an original member, so getting some random guy to do that is a kind of a tough sell, as opposed to, okay, well, someone's already in the band, let's just move them over to this spot. It made a lot of sense for a lot of reasons, but the really tricky thing is that Alan is a much better keyboard player than I am. Alan's got that rock and roll boogie woogie thing down, and even like classical chops that I don't have. So it was I think I had 2 weeks this time, and it was a very stressful 2 weeks with the metronome and trying to get all these parts under my fingers. And at first I simplified a lot of what Alan did, and then as I got more comfortable, I started adding more and more detail, like shading it out a little bit, like, oh, he's actually doing this, and I kind of played like a bare bones thing. Kind of like, do you like Yes?
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's like when Tony Kaye had to play Rick Wakeman's keyboard parts.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, like you get the impression, but he's doing the gig, but they're not exactly the same. At first I was Tony Kayeing it, and then I sort of added more of the Rick Wakeman in as I went. Like if that for that's but the analogy, the way it works in my head.
I mean, that makes perfect sense because Tony's more of like an organ player, whereas
he's
he
a
doesn't
blues
have
guy.
all the big flourishes like Rick Wakeman does. Yeah, exactly. So do you feel like you're still learning on keyboards then as you've gone along all these years?
I just feel like it's the same on almost every instrument, because you can learn a song 5 times, because you'll learn a song first time and you'll be like, oh, I know this, I got it. And then you'll hear, after playing it for a few months, you hear it again, like, oh, I'm not really doing that thing, am I? And then let me learn that part. So I keep adding things in, and then like Buck will come up to me, oh, you know what Alan used to do? He used to do this one thing that you should add to this. And the other thing with Blue Oyster Cult is a lot of times the studio version is not the definitive version, because that's what I'm used to, especially with the band geek stuff that I do. It's like, no, the studio version, that's what we do. That's where we get all the parts from. But a lot of times it's, no, we did this live show in 1976, and Alan played this one, like he improvised this thing, and that became the way this song is played. So, and also like our manager Steve, he'll come to a show. Steve has a really like encyclopedic knowledge of everything the band's ever done. So he'll be like, on your feet and on your knees. You know what I mean? Alan doesn't play that on the organ; he plays it on piano, and that's kind of better. And I listen, I'm like, yeah, that is better. And so I've learned these songs a bunch of different ways, and I keep playing different. Like for example, "Flaming Telepaths." I've had to relearn a bunch of times depending on what version we're talking about, because think about it, like you know that you probably know this better than anybody. There's a lot of different versions, and there's a lot of debate onto what the best version is.
Yeah.
um
That's like I've heard for years, like fans discussing what the best version of Astronomy is,
right.
and usually it's one of the live versions, but it depends on
Yes.
which live album you're talking about, right? So yeah.
Hmm. So, and then there's like, okay, well, and Alan was always experimenting with, okay, I'll play all piano this time. All right, this time I'm going to play it on the synth. Okay, now, you know what? It's an organ version. So for me, it's like, it's not just like, here's the song, learn it. It's like, well, here's 40 years of history, and you have to kind of cobble that together and pick what is thought of as the definitive version of this, and a version that you can play. That's because everybody has their own style. The one thing where I really got OCD about the keyboard parts is when we did the Agents of Fortune live thing, because all they had to tell me is, no, studio version, that's the gospel here, and I'm like, all right, and I went nuts with that. I got every single sound. That was one of the most fun things I ever got to do in this band. And I'm primarily a guitar player. Like, I hardly did any guitar playing on that show, and it was so much fun. The one guitar thing I did that was really fun was Tenderloin, when I jumped from the keys to the guitar, because there's a little bit of tricky harmony things, and me and Buck love doing that sort of thing. So that was really fun. But sitting there and trying to get every little synth sound and every little sample and sound effect, like that was really fun for me to do.
Cool. Well, that sounds like it's been a pretty wild ride for you, which is great to hear. And one of the things that I find really interesting, and this probably maybe for you as well. So you've been in the band all this time, but they hadn't released a new album since the Mirror album, not the Mirror album, Curse of the Hidden Mirror,
Right.
back in 2001. So that's a long time. So we didn't get The Symbol Remains till last year. So how cool was it for you to be able to record a brand new album of new material with these guys after so many years? Was that something you were like really hoping and waiting for? And like, what kind of led the band to finally say, all right, we're finally going to sit down and write a new album?
It was a dream come true. It was, something we talked about from day one. Eric told me, like, like at that Vegas gig, he said, "This is great because you write music." You know what I mean? So in 2004, what's Curse of Hidden Mirror is what, 2002?
Yeah,
And
one or two, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Long
So
time ago.
they just released Curse of the Hidden Mirror. So in their mind, they were gonna release another record. So they thought, like, okay, great, we have someone else that can add to the pool of songs when we have to make a new record. And then, like, the thing is, it costs a lot of money to make an album,
Sure.
even if everybody has, home recording studios and Pro Tools or Logic or whatever you have, or even GarageBand. You know what I mean? Like, it still costs a lot of money, and there's a lot of time, and especially when a band doesn't live all in the same place. Like, you gotta, now we're talking about hotel rooms and flights and rehearsing and all this stuff. It's easier for, yeah, we live in the easiest time to make a record, but it's easier to make a record with one guy by himself, because it's like, all right, you don't have to, all the resources you need are right here, um but for a band to do it, especially a band that's spread out, it's a challenge. I mean, you could do it completely remote, and I've done stuff like that, but really, this is a band, and it's got to sound like a band. Like, and and that was like a difference of the way Buck and I work. Because Buck, the way I work is, I'm very almost like clinical about it, where it's like, oh no, these are the parts. Here's a click track, everybody. And Buck's like, no, we got to groove together. We have to swing, And he was very, you know, that he really drove that point home with us. Like, no, we are going to sound like a band. This is not going to be like, Pro Tools to death. And he was right. You know what I mean? Because it's you could hear it. We sound like we're playing these songs because we are. We're in a room playing them together. Especially the basic tracks. 'Cause that's when COVID hit. But yeah, it was an amazing. Every like 3 or 4 years we would get okay, we're gonna make a new record. It's not like the band said, no, we're done recording albums. Like that was never a thing. I mean, Eric would joke about it and he would sort of troll about it, for lack of a better term, because Eric is very funny. Eric has a sense of humor, and I have a similar sense of humor to Eric, so I know when he's kidding. You know what I mean? But some people are like, oh, why is he saying whatever? Like he's kidding. You know what I mean? It's a joke. But that was always the plan, to make another record. It's just the logistics of it, or the offer. Like, we had to wait for everything to kind of fall into a place where we could do it. Um, and the nice thing is, like, every time, it was like every 2 or 3 years, I'd hear, okay, we might make a new record. There's an offer. We'll see if we can work it out. And every time that would happen, I'd say, ooh, I'd start writing songs, right? And then, this, fell through. Okay. Then a few years later, we got an offer, writing songs. Okay, very excited. It's not going to happen. Okay. In fact, we did it just to drive the trolling thing home. We did a thing on my podcast where Eric came on, and we said, Eric, we were going to make an album in 2008, and then something happened. He goes, oh yeah, the World of Warcraft expansion came out, and I couldn't really devote enough time to it. And then I said, he was, obviously it's a joke. So we find, so every time, like, it was like happened 4 or 5 times that we would start, like, we even a few times got together to start rehearsing new songs. Like, I remember hearing Nightmare Epiphany in like 2005, because Don wrote that for he wrote that for a new record that we were supposed to do, and then it didn't happen. So, and I wrote songs, and I just kept doing it. And then, like, we had another thing where I think Eric would let me tell this story. We had another thing. This was like maybe 5 years ago, where we got an offer. Let's write songs. And Eric came over, and he had a folder of lyrics. And there was one John Shirley lyric in there for That Was Me. And he and I, like, wrote half the song there. And then the offer fell through, and it never happened. Then, like, this last time when Frontiers gave us the offer, Eric we came over to my house to write music, and he said, all right, I have these lyrics for this song. That Was Me. I go, okay, cool. And I'm reading it. I'm like, this looks really familiar. You see those bullet holes? And I was like, I think we wrote this. He goes, what? I was like, no. He goes, I'm pretty sure we wrote this. We did this already. He goes, what do you mean? And I looked through my computer. I was like, oh yeah. And I played him the demo. He's like, I have no memory of this. I said, yeah. So I said, it's not done yet. He's like, yeah, let's finish it. So he and I, like, finished That Was Me, and that was the first song we had done. And we like, both of us spaced on that one that we already wrote, because I think I had the riff, the verse and the chorus, but like, Eric put the bridge on it and everything, and then we finished it. But yeah, so when it actually happened and we were, like, getting into it, it was awesome, because from all of the false alarms, I had a bunch of songs ready to go. Because every time they would, like, dangle the carrot in front of me, like, ooh, let me start writing songs, in the hopes of getting one song, on a Blue Oyster Cult album. But by the time it actually happened, 18 years or 17 years later, whatever it was, I had, like, a bunch of stuff written for it, and just worked out that way. And I'd only really recorded stuff on my own. I did my own solo stuff, or with my own band. So it was interesting to see how people who were actually successful at this recorded. Because, what did I sell? Like 200 copies, and my dad bought most of them, on my CDs. But to see guys who sold 13 million albums, and to get to see Buck's songwriting process, a guy who's written 3 hit songs, like, that was something, and a real learning experience, because I wasn't really used to, like, input like that. Like, usually I was used to being the boss. So it was it was a little bit of an adjustment at first because when you write a song, you have a demo of it and you fall in love with that demo. And when people say, well, that's no good, you should change that. You should take that out. Like, for example, The Machine, right? On my demo for The Machine, it goes like, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus. And both Buck and Eric were like, you got to get rid of that first chorus. Let it go another time. And I'm like, thinking like, screw you guys, like this is my song, you know what I mean? And then, but then like they're like, no, just like believe me, they're like, cut it out in the demo, like edit that out and let me know what you think. And I put it on, I'm like, damn it, they're right. So I guess having all this experience and gold and platinum records, that amounts to something that
It does.
some schmuck in his basement in Staten Island doesn't understand. But it was really like that. And it's not like it wasn't like about being bossy. It was like, okay, let's make these songs the best they can be.
They can be,
yeah. And let's really like help each other with that. And we really did. And like on Edge of the World, for example, like which was a song I had mostly completed. We wrote we arranged the middle solo section as a band, but like production wise, it's almost like the way we worked on this is almost like the way. Did you watch Get Back?
Yeah.
It was almost like how the Beatles would do it. Like if you write the song, you kind of like take the helm on that song, But Buck was just like, oh, we need to add this. He was really into the production of every song. He'd say, oh, there's this synth sound you need right here. All the little bells and whistles, like Buck was really dialed in on that. And he had like all these crazy virtual instruments that he would put in. And it made everything better. Everybody adding a little 2 cents thing, when we were doing Box in My Head, I was, and this is happening remotely, by the way, because I should backtrack to that. So we started doing the rhythm tracks in 2019, and we did them together as a band. And it's like we recorded everything, and with the idea that we're going to go back to the studio and record the rest of like all the overdubs, the vocals, any solos, keyboards together. And then the pandemic hit, and there was no leaving the house. So, Jules was pretty much done. He didn't have to really. The drums were recorded, and he played phenomenally. And Danny, for any vocals or like overdubs, he has a home setup, and Buck has a home setup. I have a home setup. Eric didn't, so we made like a makeshift studio, and we sent a bunch of gear to Eric's house and put up like a pretty janky vocal booth made out of like PVC and shipping blankets. And he got a mic, and he got an interface, and I would remotely take control of his computer. And it was basically like being in the booth and in the control room. Eric was in the booth. It was several miles away. I was in the control room, and we would just work like that. And we would produce each other. So when it came time for me to play Box in My Head on guitar, I was talking to Buck like I'm talking to you right now, and he was just watching me play. And it like just weird things that happened. Like at one point in Box in My Head, I went I did a dive bomb, which I kind of did as a joke. Like what's the worst thing I could play right now that he would get mad at me? I would just go, and he was like, oh, that's great. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, we're leaving that in. And how in the weeds do you want me to get with all this stuff?
I mean, we're talking. All right, just so you know, this was voted Sea of Tranquility's #1 album of the year last year. So we have a ton of fans of this album and the band here amongst our viewers. So I'm sure they're loving hearing all this stuff.
Okay, so the thing that I was really impressed with was, I loved doing just interacting with the guys in this sort of strange way of working, this Zoom method of working. We used a few things. We used like this great software called Connection Open, and we use Zoom sometimes, or Google Hangouts, whatever was giving us the clearest connection at the moment. That's what we would use. But just Eric's work ethic was amazing on this. Eric hit this hard, like every day. He'd be like, all right, let's sing. Let's do this guitar part. Let's play this keyboard part every day. He was a workhorse on this. And you know, as a singer, the more you sing, you get tired, but you also get stronger. And I think Eric's voice sounds fantastic on this record.
Yeah.
And because he was working his butt off, he really was. And we did grueling sessions, long sessions, and he was just sounded amazing. And just I was blown away. Like he was wearing me out. You know what I mean? Because I didn't have to do anything. I was just sitting here saying, okay, let's do this again. Let's try this again. Let's try this song. And he was just he was like I can't workhorse. That's what he was. And that's really what kind of what he is. 'Cause especially like considering how long he's been doing this and that he still goes out and kicks butt and sings. You know what I mean? It was very inspiring. And also, like he and I like were very efficient about this. Like we were trying to get this done like as quickly as possible because deadlines and you have to factor in margin of error. COVID was a really big margin of error to factor in, but like we wouldn't waste any time. Like we'd be in a car driving from one gig to the next. This is before the lockdown, and we'd be writing songs. Like I'd be on my iPad saying, what rhymes with death, You know? and just writing songs like that. And it was very I think because we get along on that like nerd level I talked about earlier. you know we have a similar way of doing these things. And also I think I just from knowing him for almost 20 years now, or for more than 20 years now, I kind of like you develop a shorthand with people, especially when you play music with them all the time. So Eric will say, do something effed up here. I know what he means. You know what I mean? Like in That Was Me, in the breakdown part, which Eric pretty much wrote. He was like, he goes, and we're just working on the demo. He goes, play like a really effed up solo here. I said, really? He's like, yeah, play something that totally whack that you would never play. So that was like a first take thing I did on the demo, and we all kind of fell in love with it. And originally the plan was to have Buck do the solo there, and Buck was like, nah, you gotta do that again. Like that's got to be on the record. He's like, I'll play the back thing. You got to do that. Um, and I wasn't expecting to play as much guitar on this, but I was expecting to kind of do like what Alan would do, play mostly keyboards and maybe a solo here or there. But Buck was really like, nah, do it, nah, go for it, let's do this together, come on, come on. It was very funny because like when I would write a song, I'd be like, okay, no, you're gonna solo on this, and when he'd write a song, I was like, you're gonna solo on this. I think we were so concerned about the other one. It just goes to show, like, Buck Dahmer's a guitar hero. You know what I mean? He makes it on all those like Guitar Player magazine lists. Who the hell am I? You know what I mean? Like, why would I? But I think I was so concerned with making sure that like, no, he's got like he's the guitar player. He's got to do this, and he was so concerned with no, let the kid do something.
Well, I mean, that
That
was like my next question. I mean, how good does it feel for you that they had your back and they were confident that you would deliver the goods for this album? I mean, you co-wrote or wrote a great bulk of this album. And like you said, you played a lot of guitar on it, all the keyboards. I mean, that must feel pretty good for you that they had the confidence in you and your skills to be able to deliver here on this album.
Well, thank you very much. It felt amazing, that they put a lot of faith in me, um, and kind of let me go nuts on it. And I think that came from the Agents of Fortune thing I talked about earlier. It's like I was really really excited about that whole experience and really into it, and the guys kind of just like let me go on it. You know what I mean? Like because I don't know. Do you watch any of the Band Geek stuff that I do?
I have not, but I was been looking at your head. I definitely need to check it out.
So
I've heard a lot of
so
that.
we do covers, and we try to make them pretty accurate. And when we were doing this Agents of Fortune thing, that was kind of in my wheelhouse. So they kind of let me go nuts with it. And I think from there, that was like the beginning of this journey where this, okay, you could do this. How about this? Can you do that? And they kept throwing more at me to see what I could do. And now I'm not saying that um, I did everything. Obviously, like it's a partnership. You're in a band. Everybody's doing a big part. Like these songs without the stuff that Danny played on don't sound the same. Or stuff Jules played, and Jules wrote a great song on the album. You know, so it was it felt great to be able to do this, especially after wanting to do it so badly for almost 2 decades. You
Yeah.
know, it felt amazing. And the it's hard to explain because I never had that sort of experience with, you know, seeing something that I contributed to on like Billboard,
Yeah.
or seeing, you know, people like you talking about it on YouTube, or reading an article on a website I usually look at and talk about like a song that I helped make. You know, that was, and the bittersweet thing is that it was done completely in lockdown. So it's not like there was some like grand tour and release party. But,
Right.
you know, I just I sent this is a sort of a private thing, but I sent Buck and Eric a note saying, "Thanks for letting me experience this." Because like I know it's old news to you guys, like you've done all these albums, these like classic albums, and that people have reviewed and spoken about at length, but to just have like a little piece of that and to see what that's like, that was incredible. You know, like I said, I've made albums before. You sell 200-300 copies of them, then if people forget about them. But to be part of something like this, that was magical. You know,
Yeah.
for I don't have a better word for it except for magical. Just to sit there and say, "Wow, look, this is people are talking about this. It's making people are enjoying it in their it's making an impact." And that was very special to be part of. And it's and the totally mind-blowing thing is, like, the pinch me moment is every time we play, say, like The Alchemist on stage, and I'm playing piano, and I look over and I see Eric singing it, and I see Buck playing it. I said, this was like a stupid demo that I made in my basement, you know, and now like I'm playing this song with Blue Oyster
On
Cult
stage. Yeah.
on stage in front of, and I'm looking in the audience, and the people know the words to it, and I'm going like, this is surreal.
Yeah.
And that's, I mean, I've had several moments like that in this band, like especially like I'll be playing guitar next to Buck, and I look over him like, that's Buck Dharma. You know what I mean? I'm like, this is freaking weird, you know?
Well, it's
Uh,
funny because you've led me right into my next question. Or actually, there's two of them I'm gonna combine
yeah,
here. But one thing I do want to say, and I think one of the reasons, as someone who has been following and listening to and enjoying this band since like 1980, right? So it's a good chunk of my life. One of the great things about most of the classic Blue Oyster Cult records is you had all these different personalities coming together and contributing as a unit to make the album great. You had the voices and the instrumental skills and writing skills of the Bouchard brothers. You had Buck and Eric. You had Alan. I mean, everybody contributed, right? And you could tell, and you looked forward to that. And I think that was missing a little bit in some of the latter period albums. And that's why this album is so good, because all of you guys equally took part in this album, and
yeah,
you had stakes in this album, and I think it really comes through. And then back to your last comment about you being on stage playing The Alchemist and with those guys, a song that you wrote. For me, being able to see Blue Oyster Cult, where now all of a sudden we could see Tainted Blood live. Now we can see you guys play That Was Me and Box in My Head, and all these other tracks that are all seemingly ready-made for the stage. And to see Blue Oyster Cult fans that are my age and older, because quite frankly, many of them are older than me. I'm going into my late 50s. And to see everybody know the words and get into it just as much as any of the classics from the 70s or the 80s, that's a really good thing. And I think that's why this album is going to stand the test of time. And 5 years from now, we may be looking at this as another Blue Oyster Cult classic if we aren't already, because as far as I'm concerned, I am. So, I mean, that's got to feel good for you.
I'm very proud of what we did, and I'm proud of everybody involved in it. It was, you know, we worked our butts off on it, and everybody involved. You know, every guy, all the guys in the band, and also I got to give props to our manager Steve Shank. You know, he was right there with everybody making this happen. He was, part of everything. So this was definitely. I'm I can't say enough. I can't express this in words, but I'm very proud of it. I'm very grateful that I got to be part of it. And I'm glad I got to get a few songs on it.
Cool. So, I mean, not to get ahead of ourselves here, but Will there be another?
I have no idea. I'm the wrong person to ask that question to.
All you could do is start writing stuff, right? And if the time comes, and
Yeah, I mean, I have a project. It was funny because I was working on something. I think I think part of the reason that that I had an easy time, not easy, but not the right word is, but I was sort of in songwriting mode already when we started making this album because I was writing my own album and I stopped that to work on the Blue Oyster Cult album, and I already wrote 12 songs, more than 12 songs. I scrapped a lot of them, but I wrote a lot of songs for my own album, and then I had to totally shift gears and start working on the Blue Oyster Cult album. So for me, it was like, all right, I go in like these kind of modes, like, all right, right now I'm in songwriting mode. Right now I'm in production mode. Right now I'm in mixing mode, you know. But I was in songwriting mode from my other project, and so that helped. But now I'm kind of focused on finishing my thing, which has all the guys from Blue Oyster Cult on it. Everybody's on it. We're not on one song, so there's not like this Blue Oyster Cult song. I have like, you know, Buck plays a solo on one song, Jules plays drums in a song, Danny plays bass in a song, you know, and it's an animated movie, like a musical, and Eric's a character in the musical, so I have everybody part of it, and it's taking me an unbelievably long amount of time to do it because I've had to teach myself 3D animation because it's going to be animated. So I just finished all of the music for it and all of the voices for it. Now I'm getting into the animation, and it's interesting. It's fun. I like doing it. I like doing it because it's a little different than music. You know, it's a different. I do music every day, all day. This is a little different than that, and sometimes it's nice to you know, branch out a little bit.
yeah, absolutely. Well, you got to have lots of things going on, right? Got to keep ourselves busy these days. So
Yeah, so this like to sort of sidestep your question. This is for me. This is the next big project. This is what I'm working on now. And
cool.
if the BOC thing happens, then I'll have to get back into oh God, you know, what can I write for this? You know,
Well, you know, from where I'm sitting,
does the Alchemist have a sister? I don't know. I gotta figure.
hey, why not, right? I don't know. Yeah, you know, I mean, I talk to people all the time who are fans, and obviously we have thousands and thousands of viewers here who come to the channel to listen to conversation about Blue Oyster Cult, and I hear and see their feedback. And I've worked with Frontiers Records for a long time, and they have been a great home to legacy bands and allowing them to kind of continue their careers and get, you know, new product out into the hands of the people. So I don't know. For me, it's like, I think strike while the iron's hot. That's the only advice I can give you guys, because this was really well received, and I think a sequel to that in a couple of years, I think, would be a wonderful thing. But I do want to touch on something. Having just seen you guys a couple of weeks ago, for me, I thought the set list for this tour, even though you guys played in Middletown, New York, at a venue in a town where they have a 10 o'clock curfew. So I knew you had a couple of other songs up your sleeve that you couldn't get to, which kind of sucks, but it is what it is. But I thought the set list was fantastic because, like I said, I've seen you guys fairly regularly over the last decade, and you're always mixing the set list up, which I think is great. You know, you play those hits that you got to play, but you're mixing up the deep cuts, which is great. Now you throw some new, you know, stuff from the new album onto the set, which is great. But I got to say, 2 weeks ago, the highlight for me is when you played that extended version of Then Came the Last Days of May, and you and Buck both unleashed into these ridiculously amazing guitar solos. That for me was the highlight of the night. I mean, how cool is that to play every night alongside Buck Dharma, where you both get to, like, for however, what, a minute or two each, get to go out there and just dazzle the audience. And I mean, it was just amazing to see.
It's fun. It's a little intimidating to you know, go in front of him with a solo because he's he's who he is. You know what I mean?
He is. But I mean, man, you went out there
one of the greats.
Killed it. And it's like, I went, I was like, did you see that? He goes, oh my God, Richie was absolutely amazing. I'm like, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
When Buck comes out and does his thing. It's like, that's like seeing In Memory of Elizabeth Reed with Dwayne and Dickie all those years ago, just going up and trying to one up each other. But it doesn't matter because they both blow your mind. So
Buck and I call it the meedly meedlies. He's like, we gotta go out there and give him the meedly meedlies. You know? It's amazing. It's fun to do. I the temptation is to there's a weird like thing about playing solos, and there's two forces at work. There's okay, here's the list of things that I know really well and that I know I can play and pull off perfectly. But here's the things that I kind of want to try that I might screw up, right? So to like a good solo is sort of a combination of the two. It's like you have a few like set pieces that you build the solo around. Um, Buck doesn't do any of that. Buck plays a completely different, amazing thing every night because he's a legend. I'm sort of like, all right, do I really want to go and stink in front of everybody right now? Because like, and play this thing that I just pop into my head that might be horrible. So I think he's a little braver than me on that front, where he will just go for it and like, does he make mistakes? No. It's he rolls with everything. He's so smooth. I think he's one of the smoothest guitar players, and he just like he always talks about swing, and he swings that everything is kind of like flows. Um, where I'm I'm sort of worried about like, okay, can I do this cleanly and accurately? That's I think it's just a personality thing. I think that's just my personality, my OCD. And also there's like a feeling about it. You can tell if you're in the zone, like you could tell like, okay, right now I'm hitting everything. You know what I mean? I'm hitting things I usually miss. So I'm just going to go for stuff, you know? And then there's nights where you're like, I am not playing licks that I have played for 30 years correctly tonight. I am sucking really bad, and so there's some nights where you kind of want to play it safe. And just because, like, I guess, A, you don't want to embarrass yourself. And also, B, it's like, no, I want to give people a good show. You know what I mean? I don't want to like practice in front of people. It's like, I don't want to, so there's that, and this is a jam band. You know what I mean? There's a lot of jamming,
Yeah.
and this like last days of May is my big chance to contribute to that, because a lot of times when I was on bass, it was more of a jammy role. You know what I mean? But on rhythm guitar, it's like I have to do a job. You know what I mean? I'm there to be supportive. On keyboards, a lot of time there to be supportive, unless it's like one of those Alan like piano kind of tunes where Alan's like riffing the whole time. That's a different thing. But yeah, I try to ride that balance between what I know I can play and what I might not be able to play, and that's I try to live somewhere in between there. I think I think Buck lives more on the unknown than I do. You know what I mean? He's like, I'm just gonna, because he just has the experience and confidence to do that. Like he'll just throw it out there, and if it doesn't work, he just turns it into something else that is totally out of left field. Like, wow, I didn't see that coming. There's so many times I'm listening to play, I'm like, wow, I would never have done that, and that just works really good. You know, and I think he has influenced my playing, because sometimes I'll try to be a little weirder than I usually would be. Uh, and when I go for the weird stuff, I kind of see him out of the corner of my eye. He's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, he's like, do that, do the stuff that you're not sure about, like take some chances. And I think slowly but surely he has rubbed off on me to where now I'll just be like, all right, this might be a terrible idea, but let's just do it in front
Just
of a
run
couple
with it
thousand
anyway.
people. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, it's got to be great working alongside legends like those guys. It's got to be
Yeah.
pretty amazing. So lastly, I can't let you go without talking gear, because that's what everybody wants to hear about here. So
Really?
yeah, oh, we have a lot of gear heads who follow this channel. So what's some of the guitars you're playing in the studio, out on the road, amps, effects, keys, all that kind of stuff? What's kind of like the stuff you're meddling with these days?
Sure. My main guitar on the road for over a decade has been the Music Man Axis, and they made me a special color that they call Slime Burst. And they kind of did it as a joke, but they actually ended up making a really pretty guitar. And I think it's gorgeous, but some people think it looks like puke. Whatever, to each his own. Um, I also have a prototype Federa. It is a builder in Brooklyn. They're known mainly for their basses, like Victor Wooten plays one, and Anthony Jackson. They have fantastic basses, but they're kind of starting to get into the guitar market, and I've been really busting their chops with this because they're not making like a lot of guitar builders will say, okay, here's our S model, that's a Strat. Here's our LP model. You can guess what that is.
Yeah.
They're taking the three main food groups of guitar and just copying that body. Like Federa is trying to make something from scratch, and I play it for a little bit, and I say, okay, this is doing this, this is doing this, and we're really tweaking it. And I'm so surprised that they haven't said, you know what, the hell with you. You're a pain in the ass. We're never going to make another guitar for you. They've been very receptive to my input, and I'll tell them like, look, this is too tight, this is too loose. I'm having trouble with this, and they made me a gorgeous guitar. But we're in the fine tuning process of getting this prototype really dialed in. Just because I think a lot of people they've dealt with have been sort of not jazz guitar players, but on the jazz side of things, they're a lot smoother than me. Where I'm very hard on my instruments, like they fall apart on me because I play very hard. So I think they're adjusting what they do to make a guitar for somebody like me. I also have a Line 6 Variax, which I think everybody should have one. I know a lot of people go, I'm not playing a digital guitar, but like when we do the vigil, I can go from acoustic to drop tuned. You know what I mean? Instantly. When we do I have an acoustic thing. I can play anything on that, and it's a perfect second guitar to have on a gig. It's a nice guitar. It's a Yamaha guitar, and I can do any kind of weird thing that we want to do. And I know Eric likes that I have it. He's like, oh, play the acoustic on this. I'll do this. So that's my main. Those are my guitars. Well, on the Simple Remains, I played a lot of Telecaster, a lot of I have a Fender Tele, and Buck played a lot of Fender stuff too.
You can tell that there's a certain twanginess to a few songs on the album where that I kind of thought that was the case, because I mean,
yeah, I played Tele, Strat, Les Paul, like especially on like Saint Cecilia, for example. I was trying to make it sound like the 70s. You know what I mean? Like something you would hear on Secret Treaties or Tyranny Mutation. That's kind of like my version of Dominance and Submission or Seven Screaming Disbusters. It's in the same key. It's got a kind of like a rave up sort of tempo to it. And on that, I was like, all right, I'm playing the main lick on the Tele, and then I'm going to do the fills and the Les Paul. And I think Buck played a lot of stuff on a Tele too. He bought a Tele from my dad's music store, and he used it a lot on the record. And I have a Strat that I love. It sounds wonderful. And he played that on. I played it on Secret Road on my lead, and he played it on Nightmare Epiphany. And actually, Nightmare Epiphany is totally live. Like that's done. That's a one take in the studio.
wow.
Yeah, that's and Buck played my Strat for that, and I played my guitar. And my one regret about that one is I was like so confident that I was going to be replacing my guitar part that I just pulled up like any sound on that, and then Buck was like, "What you just played was perfect." I'm like, "I'll redo it. I didn't really like the sound." Because no, leave it. So I'm like, oh. Okay, yeah. So because it was a little bit of a heavier sound than I would have liked for that particular song. But I was like, I'm gonna replace this anyway, pick up, whatever. But you could tell that we played that. That's live, and it was cool. Like I have a guitar now that was played on a Blue Oyster Cult album. So
Love that.
we did that. I played the Federa on a few songs. I played the Music Man. I think I played the. I have a Music Man Van Halen that I love. That's my favorite guitar. So I played that on a few things. I played. I have an Ibanez acoustic that I played on Secret Road. It was sort of like a Trevor Rabin idea I had because Buck does this on Secret Road, and I said I have an idea, and I doubled it with like a piezo pickup. And I sent him the track, and he's like, "Oh yeah." He was like, "Oh, that's it. That's what it needed." So that's I think that's all we did for guitars. I'm trying to think of if I played any other guitars. No, I think it was just those Strat, the Les Paul, the Telly, a couple Music Mans, the Federa, and the Ibanez acoustic. I used all Helix, Line 6 Helix. So Eric and I, and Eric played, and we ran him through the Helix. I think Buck used a Fractal. He used Fractal and Kemper. We didn't use any amps. And Danny, I believe, also used a Kemper on that. And for keys, it was a lot of virtual instruments, like a lot of native instruments, Contact, Roland. I have the Roland Composer Cloud, and I play mainly Roland keyboards. I'm trying to think of what else we use, and I know that Buck used a lot of stuff like in Digital Performer, like a lot of this. There's a lot of virtual instruments because that's like a. Are you familiar with any of that stuff? The virtual like plug-in instruments.
I've heard of stuff, but I've never used them.
Yeah, they're just basically like computerized synths, and it's like a toy box for musicians and producers. It's like, oh, I really like the sound that goes, and you'll sit there for 4 hours and you go, well, this one goes, there it is, and you sit there for hours and hours just scrolling for the perfect wind sound, and we did all stuff like that. After we would do every song, we would go through it again with bells and whistles, especially like there's a song we do called Stand and Fight, and Eric was all over this one. He's like, okay, I want to hear tanks marching. And I'm like, tanks? He goes, yeah, we need tanks here. Like, okay. So we just sit there for like an hour listening to tank samples. It was really cool. And I'm trying to think what else we used. I know Danny played Music Man, Fender, and Nash. Those are basses he played, and Jules played Dixon drums. And I think he was playing Sabian cymbals, if I'm not mistaken. And that was it. And for mics, I think I used I use all Audio Technica. I have Audio Technica 4033 and a 4047, and I believe I used I have an SSL preamp. I have API preamp. I have a Vintech. I have some nice toys here. And Eric, I think, used an SM7 and a digital Motu preamp, Motu interface. I use Motu also, and I think Buck recorded on a AKG C414 through a metric Halo interface. I'm not sure what preamp he used. Is that nerdy enough for you?
Yeah, absolutely. There you
go. More tech talk. The way we did it is I kind of acted as the librarian. So I had all the master sessions on this computer that I'm speaking to you on right now.
Keeper the files. There you go.
And then everybody would just kind of send me stuff, and I would keep everything updated. And I was very meticulous about it. Like I had spreadsheets because you have to, especially when there's files coming from everywhere. So I was like, oh, we don't have this. We don't have the Eric's background vocal on this song. Okay, we got to do that. Oh, we don't have this. Oh, I'm missing this. Oh, we have to redo this because it doesn't fit or whatever. So, I was sort of the anal retentive person when it came to doing all that stuff. And
someone's got to be that person, right?
Yeah, especially with file transferring, you know, and it could get really messy really fast. And it's like, oh, you have this version of that? Oh, I did a new version of that. Well, you didn't send me that yet. It was stuff like that. You have to really keep on top of that and constantly check the spreadsheet. It sounds like such an unsexy, non-rock way to make a record, but like you have to do it. It's with this in the digital age when you can have people in separate studios, collaborating online. Someone has to do that.
It's the world we're living in, unfortunately, right?
Yep.
Well, cool. I mean, this was great catching up with you, Richie. And for those of you watching, if you haven't heard it already, please go out and get The Symbol Remains. Check it out. It's wonderful, wonderful return from Blue Oyster Cult. And wish you all the luck on all the projects you're working on. And we'll be sure to keep tabs on that. And if you ever want to come on See It Tranquility, just to kind of join some of the panel shows we've got going here, we'd love to have you. So, but I'll be in touch. So,
I'd love to. Thank you.
Awesome. So thanks to Richie Castellano for joining us today. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. That's our webzine. We also have a Facebook page, a Twitter account, but more importantly, we're here all the damn time on YouTube. So for Richie Castellano, I am Pete Pardo. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.